Okay, hi everybody, I'm Peter Chittum. This is Do Not Fear the Command Line. This is my take on trying to help people who maybe are a little bit, concerned or worried about trying to start using command line utilities, to using shells, and to kind of help you get over a few of the obstacles and the barriers. So I call this Do Not Fear the Command Line because you are smarter than it. That's the Trailhead version of my title slide, and that's the forward-looking statement slide. Yes, that's right. It's everyone's favorite. I am going to talk a little bit about Salesforce DX. Unfortunately, I can't demo it today. Who here came because they thought I was going to demo it? Yeah, I'm really sorry. Part of the problem is that right now, the command line works, but there's no way to connect it to an org because they're in between the preview that ended and the pilot that's about to begin. Who here signed up for the pilot? Who here wants to sign up for the pilot? Okay, if you haven't signed up for it, come talk to me afterwards. I'll look up the information for how to do that. But please sign up. I am going to show Force CLI. And the good news is that a lot of the Salesforce DX CLI was actually modeled off of Force CLI. And the author or the maintainer of Force CLI is actually here today, Dave Carroll. So if you see him, give him a pat on the back and say, thanks, Dave. You did a great job. We are going to sunset Force CLI, so that's going to go away. So the target audience for this, any computer user, I think, can use the command line because that's how it used to be. Once upon a time, that was the user interface for a computer. If you want to use the command line, but you're feeling a little bit concerned about getting started, or maybe you just don't know how or where to start, this is the talk for you. Now, I have 25 minutes, so this isn't going to be like the exhaustive how-to. Let this wash over you, and then go do some research, because there's a ton of good tutorials and documentation that's probably even better than my talk. And I would encourage you to explore using the command line because it's a powerful tool. I am going to talk to you about how command line apps work and certainly give you an understanding of what is possible, including a few little admin things using Force CLI that will be able to be applied to Salesforce DX as well. I'm using a Mac. Who here is a Mac user? Windows users? So the good news is Windows 10 now supports Bash, which is the scripting or the shell that I'm going to be using for the command line. So pretty much everything I'm going to do, if you have Windows 10, you'll be able to do it. And there's an emulator that runs on previous versions of Windows called SIGWin that you can use as well. And there's also Windows command lines. The short version is that anything that I'm going to do here, you can do in Windows. It might just look a little bit different, or the command might be a little bit different. All right. So a brief overview of command lines. I'll talk about how the actual commands work. I'll then demo some basic stuff. And then I'll go through some more powerful commands, finally the Salesforce CLIs and some demos, and then some where to go next stuff. Quick history of user interfaces. This is how it began. Cards. Did anyone do programming with card-based interfaces? My hat's off to you. I actually only just learned how these worked in researching this particular talk. So basically, every card was a line of code or a line of data. Can you imagine programming that way or actually making the computer do something that way? I can't. I don't want to. They moved on to these sort of teletype things, which were kind of cool because you could type something in and it would type back like what the response was. And then they realized, actually, we could save paper because we have screens to do that now. And so they came up with command lines. And that's where actually I'm going to focus on. Of course, user interfaces moved on because we got menus, and people like numbers because you don't have to think about it. Just press number 2 and it goes and does a number 2. And then we thought, actually, you know, we really like pictures, so let's draw some pictures with things. And then we thought, actually, you know what? If we drew a picture and we could click on it, that would be even cooler. And that's how the graphical user interface was born, which has evolved into the touch-based user interface. And pretty much nowadays, we're kind of moving into this world of VR, right? So this is kind of the progression. But at the bottom of this is the core APIs of your computer. And I'm a firm believer that this is the most important tool. Who here works with a computer? Right? This is the most important tool that you have. And the better you know how this thing works, the more you can do with it. So let's get to know it a little bit. Now, picking up and using command lines, if you've started from a graphical user interface perspective, can be a little awkward, can be a little odd. You know, the positive side of the command line is that they're very fast, they're powerful, they use low resources typically, and you can do great automation. Now, on the pro side, I actually took this from a presentation somewhere. I should have referenced it. It says expert friendly, right? Expert friendly obviously means beginner unfriendly. So that is actually a con, in fact. But things like the unintuitive names of commands, they're not obvious what they do, and it's not pretty, right? So these are all things that can be kind of a downside, and I would say a blocker to adoption. But at the end of this, the command line is just an app. It's an app that runs commands. Well, that's why they call it the command line. And the commands themselves are basically little apps, right? So the command line is an app that runs other apps. Drop mic, go home. So it's actually really basic what command lines do, but it helps to understand how they work a little bit, to put them into context, because once you understand that, you'll understand that you've probably done some things in your Salesforce administration that isn't coding, that's a lot like command line commands. So how do they work? They work like this, right? There's going to be some kind of logic that goes on, right? We can have an input to that, and we can have some output from that. The input, it can either be a stream of data, so it's actually not living on the file system, but it's being streamed in. That's called standard in. Or it can be a file in the file system, or it can be nothing. So you can have a command that has no input. You just type it, it goes off and does something. You can also have output. The output is streamed out of the command, and then that's called standard out. And the nice thing is, if you stream out of one command, you can stream it back into the next command. And so you can kind of chain these things together, and I'll show you how to do that. Incidentally, what feature in Salesforce does this sound like? I have some data that comes in, I operate on that data, and I have some modified data coming out. What does that sound like to you that isn't Apex, that isn't programming? Data loader, maybe, yeah. I'm thinking on the platform itself, without even leaving Salesforce. Flows could be, yeah. What about just a formula field? Anyone done a formula field? Yeah? So this is a lot like how a formula field works. I've got some data that comes in, I write my formula, I have some data that comes out, and in fact, if you've used a formula ever in Salesforce, you know everything that you need to know to use basic command line commands. Because this is all that's happening, is we have some data coming in, we have an algorithm, or some logic that's executed on that data, and some data that comes out again. So this is case safe ID. Is everyone familiar with this particular function? Right? It takes 15-digit ID that we store in the database, run some logic on it, and we output an 18-character ID. Why do we have to do this in a function? Because we don't store this one in the database, because that would be extra data to store. And with trillions of Salesforce records, 3 extra characters doesn't seem like much for one, but for all of those trillions, it's a lot of extra data. Now, commands also have parameters. So let's say the command is go eat apple, right? I might want to change how I eat the apple. Maybe today I pick up the apple and I bite right into it. Tomorrow I pick up the apple and I slice it and I eat the slices. And then the next day I peel the apple, then I slice it, and then I eat those slices, right? So each one of those is still eating an apple, but there's slightly different ways to eat the apple. And that's how command lines parameters work, right? I'm still going to go and affect some change to this data or to this text, but I want to change the way that I affect that change, and that's what parameters allow us to do. Now, if I want to connect commands together, there are several ways to do this. If I just want one thing to happen and then the next thing, I separate them by a semicolon. And in this case, no data is passed from one to the other. I could do something with this one, write to a file on the file system, and then go pick up that file here. But if I really want to pass data from one to another, then there's an easier way to do that, and that's called piping. Who here knew that this symbol is called the pipe symbol, right? Who here knew why it was called the pipe symbol? It's called the pipe symbol because piping data from one command to the next. So I have standard out coming out of the first command. I pipe it into standard in of the next command. And this way I can actually string together 2, 5, 10 different commands and end up with some kind of very powerful output. Now, I might want to take that standard out and redirect it to the file system and write to the file system. I do that with the redirect. That's the little greater than sign. This will always replace the file name that you specify. So if you want to append to the end, you just do 2 of those, and that's going to append. And those are some basic things that you need to know. before I go in and do my demo. So again, I'm using Mac. I'm going to be using the bash shell. There's about 20 different shells out there. On Windows 10, you can run bash, you can do Cygwin, but there's also command and PowerShell. So just so you know, for Windows users, those are the things you want to look into. All right, so let's jump in and do a little demo. OK, now my little demo script went off. Say hello. Is it going to let's see if Windows Hello actually recognizes me. Oh, yes, that's good. All right. So there we go. I actually have this way more open, and I didn't prepare as I intended to. But what I'm going to do for these first little bits here is I'm going to clear off all that junk so it's a little bit easier to see. And so right now, I'm in this folder called Demo2. And you can see that that's actually this one right there. I'm going to just move around. I'm going to effect some changes to the file system just to familiarize you with a few little things that you can do. So if I want to move from one place to another, the command is cd. So I'm in this demo2. If I want to go to the parent directory, I can just do cd ... just like that. And now I'm in this CLI test directory. Once I'm in that directory, I can play around with things like I can create files. There's an easy command called touch. Touch just updates the last access date for a file, or if the file doesn't exist, it creates it. So I could say new file. And you can see the new file pops up there. If I want to get rid of that, rm new file. Now, I just did a shortcut. I hit the tab key, and it completes for me. I do that so fast, I sort of have to talk about it. So there we go. Tab. Right? So it looks for something on the file system to match that, and if it finds something, it'll bring it up. If it finds multiple, it'll give me options to pick from. So I'll do rm new file, and it goes away. If I want to create a directory, it's mkdir. And what should we call that? I'll call it demo1. And there we go. Change directory. If I want to go into that directory, cd space demo. Now, I'll tab a few times, and it'll give me my options. I've got demo1 and demo2. And now I'm in Demo 2. And let me go and click on, sorry, Demo 1 rather. That's where I should be. Demo 2 comes later. So now I'm going to create another file, but this time I want something in the file. Touch will create an empty file. I want some data in that file. And I'll get there eventually, but first let's start with Echo. Echo takes some text, so it can be just regular string text, and it spits it out to the terminal itself. So I can say hello. All right? So that's exciting. There's actually a really cool command in Windows. I'll try and turn this way up, see if we can hear it. Say hello.
Hello.
Oh, do you hear that? Did everyone hear that? Yeah? OK. Yeah, so I should have plugged it into the, best laid plans. And then if I want two things to happen together, right, so I can say echo. Actually, I'm going to use the up arrow to go back to one of the ones I did. And then we'll say hello. And then there we go. So I actually, OK, yeah, well, we'll see. I have it turned way up, so this may be blaringly loud in a second. But in fact, on the first one, echo hello, the standard out is actually that text. So I can just pipe it into the say. So let's get rid of the hello there. I don't have to repeat myself. That's one of the principles of good practices in.
Hello.
Oh, hello. Isn't that nice? You can actually change it. So I want to say the voice. Which one? We'll do the Scottish voice.
Hello.
There we go. All right. So there we go. Now, let's actually get this to a file now. So we'll say echo hello. And we'll now redirect it. And we'll call this hello.txt. You can see it just popped up there in the file system. Now, if I want to output the contents of this file, there are a couple of different ways to do this. The first one I'll show you is called cat, hello.txt. So that outputs it. And then we can do all the same kind of fun stuff as well. Now, remember, if I rerun this command, it's going to completely replace hello.txt. So if I want to add more to it, then I can do the double redirect. And I'll do that a few times. And then we can say cat hello. There we go. And then we can also do, this one's fun, say minus v. This one's called good news.
Hello, hello, hello.
There we go. So, and if you ever want to interrupt something because it's a bit tedious or boring, you can just do Control-C, and then ta-da, we're done. So I'm going to finish up and clean up what I did. Let's do cd ... We'll go out of demo 1. Now I want to get rid of this. Remember, rm will work to do that. But if I try and do it to a directory, it's going to sort of not like that. It's going to say, I'm sorry, that's a directory. You can't do that. I can do rmdir. But it only likes me to do that if the directory is empty. So if I want to go and do the nuclear option, I can then do rm minus r, and that'll do a recursive over all the directories in that directory, and it'll make it go away. And we're done. Okay. So just a few basic commands to start out with. Let's talk about some of the more powerful things that we have once it comes up. Hello. Let's just escape out. OK, that's interesting. There we go. And we'll try to bring it right back in. All right. So one really handy one is alias. Alias allows you to take a more complex command that you might repeat over and over again and basically create a shortcut for it. So some of the longer ones that I just did, if you were to do that many, many times a day, you just create an alias for it, and you can do it very quickly. There's also, I showed you cat. Cat is actually to concatenate. There is also a head and a tail, so this sounds a little bit like a sort of veterinary anatomy class. Actually, dog doesn't exist, but remember, alias, I could make it exist if I want to, okay? So if you're a dog person, there is space for you in the command line as well. There's WC. This is actually word count. So if I want to count stuff in a text file, I can use WC to do that. Find allows me to look in the file system. Then we get to some of the funnier named ones, like grep. Grep actually stands for something, Global Regular Expression Print. Regular expression is the way we look for text in the Unix system by default. And it's kind of a very powerful wildcard system. It basically matches patterns, and we'll use that in the next demo. So this allows me to look for text in a file, and it'll show me which lines match that particular text, or which lines have text that matches that. It's a better way of saying that. And then sed is string editor, and stream editor allows me to change the value of something as it's flowing through the stream. All right. Now, I'm going to cover two more that I'm actually not going to use today. awk is one of them. This is actually a proper programming language in Unix. I just want you to know it's there because if you dive into this, sed is something that I would think everybody here could use rather easily. awk, you really need to learn the programming language, but they get used together a lot. So I just want you to be aware that it's there because you'll bump into it. You know, save it for later once you get to some more advanced scripting stuff. And then curl is a really powerful utility that allows you to go and make a web request and get the contents of that web request back. Now, I'll show you why I'm not going to demo curl today, because it's not really meant for, thank you, it's not really meant for sort of end user administrators of a computer. It's really meant for talking to programming languages. All right. So I just got the 5-minute mark, which means I'm way behind. But I'm going to really quickly jump into this other demo here. So cd demo 2. There we go. Now ls is a way we look for. Let me clear, and let's do that again. ls minus al. Okay. So I've got a couple of text files here. One is a forward-looking statement, so I can cat that. There we go. I can get the first few lines of that with head. So head allows me to say head minus n10 forward-looking.txt. So I can get the first 10 lines of that. And then I can also use tail, again, minus n10. And I can get the last 10 lines of something. So I could very quickly create sort of an abridged version of something. OK? And then once you have this, you can start to do things like grep. So I've got this big text file. Maybe I want to look for the word statement in that. So I can use grep. And I can say, go find the word statement. And we're going to look for that in the forward-looking.txt. All right, so you can see every line that has the word statement in it. If I then wanted to change that, so let's pipe that to sed. And we say substitute. What are we going to substitute? The word statement. And what are we going to substitute statement with? We want forward-looking what? Clouds? Clown. I like it. Forward-looking clowns. I think we need more forward-looking clowns in this world. And now you can see this presentation may contain forward-looking clowns that involve risks, uncertainties. Now you can see this can be very powerful. Let's say if you have a CSV file that you want to make some changes to as you're getting that out from Salesforce. All right. So let's very quickly move on and cover those last little bits. Okay. I think I'm going to run into this problem again. Yeah, and up again. All right. Okay, now I talked about curl. This is why I'm not going to demo curl. That's a pretty basic curl statement that makes a call to a Salesforce URL. The thing is we need to have a session ID to make it work. So yeah, I'm not going to demo that. But that's why we have things like Force CLI and the new Salesforce DX CLI as well. Right, so Force CLI has been community maintained, mostly by Dave Carroll, for the last couple of years. And Salesforce DX is going to supersede that when it goes into production. There are a couple of other CLI tools. Lightning CLI tool is for doing static code analysis of Lightning components. Unless you're writing Lightning components, you don't need to worry about it. And the Heroku CLI is for managing Heroku instances. And actually, there's a lot of admin stuff that's available in the Heroku world as well. So let's jump in and do some quick final demos with Force CLI. So let me clear, and let's do force help. So if I do force help, I can see all the different commands in there. The first one I'm going to need to do is log in. So force login. And that's going to take me through, oop, that's not the right one. I want that one. And allow. And there we go. It says, yes, I'm done. And you can see it's come back and said, yes, you're complete. So the next thing I'm going to do, I actually really like force limits. Limits are good. But you can see it spits out a lot of them. And then here's where we can do something like grep. So I can do force limits, and I can grep that. I can say go look for, let's say we want to really quickly find out what's the current dashboard usage limits in my org. That's something an administrator might really want to know, right? So I can say dashboard. And what that's going to do is it's going to match every line that has the word dashboard in it. And I can see down at the bottom there are 3 of them. I can then take that and I can say, in addition to the line that says dashboard, go and get the next 2 lines after the word dashboard is encountered. And now I actually have something very useful. So I can see I've not used any dashboard refreshes today or in the last 24 hours, et cetera. So I can actually look for limits very quickly. That's way faster than logging in, going and finding where my limits are, right? So you can see that if you start to use some of these basic command line tools, you can really make this fast. This gets even better if I take something like that and I do alias, which is what I did. So if I just type dash limit like that, it does the same thing, but I've created an alias for it. I can see my aliases here. I created a big one. But it's this one right here that says dash limit, right? That's the same command I did, but I just created a shortcut for it, all right? Okay, so last thing we're going to do, everyone's waiting outside the door for the demo jam. I better be quick. All right, so force query, and I'm going to do really quick, select ID, comma, name, comma type from account, and we'll get some output from that. I'm going to expand this to make it a little bit bigger. Well then, let's say we want that to be in a CSV format, because we like CSV, right? Format equals, is it format equals or format colon? Format colon CSV. That's why we have cheat sheets. There we go. And I can look at this and I can say, actually, there's some missing type values over here. Let me see if I can grep those out so I can get those a little bit better. So let's pipe that to grep, and we'll say look for comma, double quote, like that. There we go. And I can actually see the ones that I'm missing. Great. I will wrap up. Once I do that, I can do something really cool. So I can say, OK, go get those. Let's, now that I know which ones I'm looking for, I'll do where type equals null. And then let's take the grep out of there. We're going to sed this. So we're going to substitute the comma, single quote, substitute, slash, comma, double quote, and then we're going to put in there, comma, customer direct. And then we have to limit that and then put that there. And we can say, OK. All right, so now let's take that. We're going to redirect that to updates.csv. And then we're going to say, now run a force bulk update to account and use updates.csv. Ta-da! And that's going to go and kick off. And in one line, I've pulled out some data, updated it in the stream, and then written it right back to my org. Ta-da! Now's when you applaud. Yay! All right. So who feels like they now have some context for why the command line could be good for them? Yeah? Very good. That's all I wanted today, something very basic. So go check out tutorials. I have a couple of little notes here at the end that I will skip over, just about things like Windows and Unix differences. There's a whole bunch of other things that you can use out there. Couple of links. I have posted this to SlideShare. I will tweet that out. I don't have time for questions, but grab me anytime today, and thank you.